Okay, well, I thought it would be interesting to analyze as a programming experiment and also to try and give some balance from the point of view of a Brexiteer, BBC Question Times programming. And so that's what I'm going to do right now for the first time, and who knows, maybe I can expand on this idea as a program format. Some sort of an extension to Daily Brexit, and have a look and see how BBC Question Time works, the kind of things that are said on it, and just throw in some alternative comments from probably more the point of view of people who are, in my opinion, genuine patriots as opposed to the kind of fakes that we tend to see on that show and that produce that show. And if you are Facebook or YouTube or what have you that will be uploading this to afterwards, I'll be doing this live maybe in the future, but if you are from those guys, this is news. I am allowed to use this content because it is, they call it news, but the fact is it is propaganda. And therefore, the BBC is the news, and that is what we're analysing today. And so that tonight, and so that is the story here more than anything else. What is the validity of the BBC's claim that they are a balanced news organisation? Is that true or is that fake? That's what I'm going to be assessing here. So this content I'm using on a fair dealing basis, and that is perfectly legal, whether you like it or not. And let's have a listen. Let's see how this goes.
C1 families fight for answers in Dying for a Degree tonight at 11:35. Now on BBC One, join the debate in Question Time.
Tonight we're in Epsom. Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, Rory Stewart, recently appointed to his first cabinet post as International Development Secretary and a candidate for the Tory party leadership. An MP for more than 20 years, Labour's Shadow International Trade Secretary Barry Gardiner, Joe Swinson, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Alex Phillips, former head of media for UKIP, elected this week as an MEP for the Brexit Party, and Harvard Professor of Psychology, international author, who argues that despite all the challenges of the planet, we've never had it so good. Stephen Pinker.
So hold on a sec. We've got, let's just run that back quickly, and normally, hopefully, I'll be able to do this a bit more succinctly, but let's just run this back to look at these panelists again. See who they've got on this panel, because it seems to me that it is already very biased indeed. Hold on, let's go back. Okay.
On tonight's panel, Rory Stewart, recently appointed to his first cabinet post as International Development Secretary and a candidate for the Tory party leadership.
Who wants to rule out a WTO Brexit, yeah, i.e. a true Brexit. He is not a Brexiteer, therefore. He wants to push through a deal not dissimilar to that of Theresa May. In other words, vassalage, villanage. Okay, so he is not a Brexiteer.
An MP for more than 20 years, Labour's Shadow International Trade Secretary Barry Gardiner.
Who is not a Brexiteer, who wants a second referendum, a second chance at democracy. He is not a Brexiteer.
Joe Swinson, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Not a Brexiteer. Okay, we'll see what she has to say for herself.
Alex Phillips, former head of media for UKIP, elected this week as an MEP for the Brexit Party.
Okay, let me just write down some details here. So that is the one Brexiteer, as I understand it, on this panel. One Brexiteer so far. We've got Rory Stewart, we've got Joe Swinson, we've got Alex. I'm not sure what her surname is because I've never heard of her before, to be honest with you, but she's from the Brexit Party, so presumably she is a Brexiteer. And we've got this guy.
And Harvard professor of psychology, international author, who argues that despite all the challenges of the planet, we've never had it so good. Steven Pinker.
Steven Pinker with the dodgy hairdo. Looks like Brian May. Steven Pinker. Okay. Steven Pinker, who is a psychologist from Harvard, which as far as I can tell has become libtard central. But we'll give him the benefit of the doubt for now. Hold on a sec, I'm missing somebody here. There's 5 people on that panel. Let me just get this right. Let me get this right, people.
On tonight's panel, Rory Stewart, recently appointed to his first cabinet post as International Development Secretary and a candidate for the Tory party leadership. An MP for more than 20 years, Labour's shadow international trade...
Barry Gardiner. Yeah, Barry Gardiner's the other one. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Remoron. Right. Okay. So the panel consists of 3 Remainers, 1 Leaver, that's the Brexit Party person, Steven Pinker, who is the, I don't know yet, psychologist from Harvard, almost certainly a Remainer, and of course is hosted by a BBC employee, probably, almost certainly, and judging by the questions that she does not ask, a Remainer.
Secretary Barry Gardiner, Joe Swinson, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Alex Phillips, former head of media for UKIP, elected this week as an MEP for the Brexit Party, and Harvard professor of psychology, international author, who argues that despite all the challenges of the planet, we've never had it so good. Steven Pinker. Welcome to our panel, to our audience here, and of course to you at home. You can argue along in the usual way using hashtag BBCQT on Facebook, on Instagram and on Twitter. It's been quite a week since we were last on. The Prime Minister's resigned. Several Tory leadership candidates are out of the starting blocks. We've got one right here. And we've had the results of the EU elections. I think there's a lot to talk about, don't you?
We've got one right here who wants to rule out a WTO deal. In other words, he's a Remainer.
Let's get on with our first question, which comes tonight from Aidan Duddy.
Is electing a new Conservative leader like changing the captain of the Titanic after it had struck an iceberg?
You're chortling away, Barry. Do you want to kick us off?
Well, look, I don't want to intrude in private grief in the Tory leadership
As if he hasn't got grief in his own party.
Contest. You have to wonder, given that the arithmetic doesn't change in the House of Commons...
Hold on a sec. Given that the arithmetic doesn't change in the House of Commons, consider the disparity between the arithmetic in the House of Commons and that of the British people, yeah? If the referendum result were represented in the House of Commons, 408 of 650 MPs would be for leaving the EU, 62.8%. The reality, as we know, is that the Commons is crammed full of people that want to stay in the EU. In other words, there is no democracy in that house. Carry on.
What will actually change by a new leader? And look, I think if you look back at what happened last week, I've certainly learned a couple of things from the election results that we had then.
What did you learn?
I would say the first thing I learned is that clarity, whether right or wrong, beats a complex message every time. I think.
And do you think Labour's message isn't clear? Lots of your very senior.
Yeah, look, I think that.
Let's be clear, yeah, the Labour Party is split. It's totally split. There's no clarity there.
What we did is we went in there with a complex message, and we were, I think, right. It was an honourable thing to try and say, look, we will try and have a compromise, negotiate a deal, and if we can get that through, then that will enable us to respect and honour the referendum result.
Hold on. Who ever mentioned a deal during the referendum campaign?
So should Jeremy Corbyn change the message now, Barry?
Well, look, I think what you've seen in the past few days is precisely that.
Have we?
What we've said is...
What is the message now?
Well, the message now is that we have to move to the final phase of the composite motion that we had at party conference last year.
That was to have a second referendum, as I understand it, yeah?
And that was very simple. It said, look, you must try and deliver. You must try and negotiate and get through a deal in Parliament that can actually succeed in delivering. We've tried in good faith to do that.
Again, that was never, ever debated during the referendum campaign. We just said we wanted to leave.
We haven't been able to, and I think that means we must now move to the second phase, which is, we always said, we would, in order to stop a no deal, that we would...
It isn't a no deal. It's a WTO deal. It's a WTO deal, a soft landing.
Go back to the people.
A second referendum.
So have a second referendum?
Well, or in a general election. And actually...
Or a general election. Okay, now party politics is creeping in, putting party before country.
I think the real question around the Tory leadership, sir, is this. Who can they elect who can avoid a general election within a year? Because most Conservative MPs do not want a general election. Let's be clear about that. They're
because they don't want to lose their jobs.
Very fearful of a general election. But in order to get the Tory leadership, many of those people think that they have to promise to commit to a no deal. And if...
Because that's what the people tend to want, increasingly.
If they do that, the likely arithmetic...
And it's not a no deal, it's a WTO deal.
...in Parliament would be to stop a no deal because of the damage it would do to jobs and the economy.
Hear that back.
And that would
hear that back.
Who can they elect who can avoid a general election within a year? Because most Conservative MPs do not want a general election. Let's be clear about that. They're very fearful of a general election. But in order to get the Tory leadership, many of those people think that they have to promise to commit to a no deal.
It's not a no deal.
And if they do that, the likely arithmetic in Parliament would be to stop a no deal because of the damage it would do to jobs and the economy.
That's absolute. Look, you know what? They decided to give the choice to the people. And the reason they decided that was because they didn't have any choice, because of the insurgence of UKIP. And the message from the people, they had to give that referendum, and they gave that referendum. They gave the choice to the people, and now they don't want to honour it.
And that would most likely, the easiest way to stop that, or it's not easy, but the way of stopping that is through a vote of no confidence in the government, which certain Tory MPs have actually said they would support in order to block a no deal.
I.e. Dominic Grieve, for example,
I thought it was very significant that Philip Hammond, actually on the Today programme, actually had adopted Labour Party policy. He said that that a second referendum or a second people's vote might be necessary in order to stop no deal.
He's correct here, Barry Gardiner. He's correct. If Boris, for example, which is Remain's worst fear, probably, and particularly now that Trump has endorsed Boris effectively just today or yesterday now, that's correct, that they are desperate to stop that, because it increasingly looks as though Boris Johnson would be cornered into a situation, whether he wants to or not, to deliver a WTO deal, not no deal, a WTO deal, leaving without an EU-UK deal, but a global deal. And then guess what? I'm sure, you tell me, is the EU going to want to continue to trade and sell BMWs, considering that they have a trade surplus over the EU? I think that's the case, no? So he's probably right that that they are scared of there being a prime minister who would want to consent to the will of the British people, and that then Parliament would thwart that, and therefore there could well be a vote of no confidence, and there could well be a general election. And indeed, the Tories, they don't want that. But then again, they want a leader who they think will get them back their seats, because they're a bunch of Jobsworths. He does have a good point there, I have to say.
So that's the real question for the Tory leadership.
Okay.
Who can avoid a general election this year? And
In other words, it's blackmail, isn't it? Do you want to keep your job? Is your job more important to you than the future of the country?
successfully negotiate through?
Joe, elect a new Conservative leader like changing the captain of the Titanic after it struck the iceberg?
Well, I think both Labour and the Conservatives hit icebergs last week, if we're honest. But, I mean, I think the analogy is...
The only reason that people voted for the Lib Dems is because they are pro-Remain, and there is a contingent of the country which is pro-Remain. If we look at that statistically, we saw the Brexit Party getting over 30%, what was it, 32, 33%, something like that, of the vote. The Lib Dems got 20%, considerably less. Very telling statistic. It's not a done deal, those statistics. I'm not suggesting it is, but nonetheless, a huge gap between those that voted to leave and those that voted to stay.
Is in some ways a good one for this reason. We're looking at this through the prism of the Tory leadership contest, and actually we should be looking at it through the lens of what is in the national interest.
Oh, for crying out loud. I mean, we're stupid, aren't we? We can't think for ourselves. We can't think about what we want. Oh, no. How elitist, yeah?
And, the iceberg, the disaster that we're heading towards, is about what happens to our country. Now, Rory aside, most of these Tory leadership contenders have been merrily talking about going for a no-deal Brexit, as if that is something that should be...
It's not a no-deal Brexit, it's a WTO Brexit.
...considered or contemplated by any responsible politician. And we see this through a who's up, who's down. It's like some kind of episode of 15 to 1,
Bollocks.
This is not a game show. It's not a scenario where all is at stake is, whether you win the prize or get a pat on the back by Noel Edmonds and go home empty-handed.
I'm sorry, but this is condescending.
We are talking about a scenario where our economy loses £140 billion.
According to who? What, Carney? Carney, that told us that it was going to be Armageddon off the back of just the referendum result? Come on.
Where we have threats to our security. And
why? Why do we have threats to our security? We don't have threats now? There's no reason why we should not have ancillary deals on top of the WTO deal to be able to cooperate with our European partners, our European friends, fellow nation states. There is no reason why we should not be able to cooperate on security on our terms.
And where our NHS is undermined in a no...
Yeah, and how much are we spending on the EU that we could be spending on nurses and doctors?
Deal Brexit. A doctor came to see me and told me about the plans that were in place and his concern, working in nuclear medicine, that despite all of the fridges that Matt Hancock has boasted that we're now the world's biggest buyer of fridges because of how many medicines we have to stockpile, despite that, for those nuclear medical products that have a short half-life, the queues at the Channel Tunnel at Dover are going to mean that fewer procedures for cancer diagnosis and treatment are going to be able to be undergone. This is what we're...
Oh, I'm sorry, but this is just utter claptrap. You know, if you think, Joe Swinson, that the Germans do not want to continue to sell us their cars, the French, everybody else want to trade with us, you're a total imbecile.
We're talking about,
Okay.
and I think it is entirely irresponsible the way most Conservative leadership contenders are going about it.
The remorons in the crowd can clap all they like, but she sounds like an idiot.
I'm going to come to you on this in a moment. I just want to ask you, Joe, since we've got you and we're talking about leadership, you've been dodging questions all week about whether you're going to stand for the leader, to be leader of the Liberal Democrats. I might as well ask you tonight,
She looks like Wallace and Gromit.
are you going to stand?
Yes, I am going to stand to be leader of the Dems.
And I hope that they vote you in because, love, I mean, let's face it, it ain't going to work.
You heard it here first, folks.
I'll set out my plans tomorrow, but I happen to think that this country is crying out for a liberal movement that will challenge the forces of nationalism and populism, and the Liberal...
Hold on a sec. Nationalism and populism. So there are people that care about their country, and somehow that's bad. Yeah. And populism, yeah, pop is Latin for people. What's wrong with populism? What is wrong with people calling the shots instead of having people like this idiot who sounds like a 5-year-old, Joe Swinson, telling us what we should and shouldn't be thinking, as though we can't think for ourselves about what's best for ourselves and our own communities.
Democrats need to be at the heart of that movement, and I'm the person to lead it.
I hope you are, just for fun.
Alex, the question was about the Conservative leadership. Obviously, you've heard what Joe had to say about no deal.
Yeah, I mean, look, actually no deal is the de facto position we're in now, come the 31st of...
It is not no deal. This girl, Alex Phillips, is from Brexit Party, and she is calling it a no deal. Come on! For crying out loud, if we can't sort out the English language, use of the English language in our own camp, for goodness sake, I mean, what is that? Farage, sort out your team.
of October, and that is the net result of prevarication and politicking in Westminster. In fact, what Brexit has done is shine a spotlight on our domestic politics, on the nature of our democracy, and what we have seen, really, is the two establishment parties spend more time focusing their agenda against the other, trying to figure out how they can create longevity for their particular political brand and not longevity of democracy in this country. Now, going back to no deal, you know, the sort of...
It isn't a no deal. Oh, my God. I mean, why did BP put this... I'm sorry, but she clearly is not very bright. Within 20 seconds, didn't know who she was, but can we not do better than this?
Apocalyptic situation that Joe paints. She better be careful, someone might take her to court. That's a bit of a joke. But
Reference to Boris Johnson being taken to court by some bloke who turns out is a complete moron, and he's taking his donations and chucking them into some penthouse in Canary Wharf or something like that. But anyway.
Look, the point is this. The referendum was about leaving the EU and all of its institutions. It was very simple. That's what we should have done. And it should be in the
Yes.
PM's gift, the next PM's gift, to stick to that. A lot of contingency planning is taken.
To stick to the democratic will of the British people.
taken place. The European Commission and Whitehall have already done a lot to make sure that if that scenario comes to pass, then we will be prepared. And as a G5 nation, I'm sorry, with only 5% of our businesses in the UK trading directly with the EU, we should be able to do this. We absolutely should be able to do this. It will take political will on...
Not should, are. It's just bloody obvious, for crying out loud.
Both sides, but I'll tell you this as well. Europe is about to face a banking crisis. Our economy is with 19 member states. It's not in their interests to create some sort of punitive Brexit. Yes.
At last, she's saying something useful.
They need to sort of try and scare Britain into not doing, you know, not leaving the customs union and having completely free and fair trade with the world, which would undermine their own protective system. They have their own agenda, of course.
But Alex, let me just ask you this. When you look at the results of the EU election last week, and I've seen lots of people from various parties saying it tells them that the thing that they're doing is right and they need to do more of it, the Brexit Party included. But when you look at the results, and there's been a lot of analysis of it, it shows it was more or less a draw.
Yeah.
So what...
Hold on a sec. It was more or less a draw. And she nodded too. Brexit Party got nearly half as much again as the Liberal Democrats got. Let's carry on.
What makes you think the Brexit Party is the party with the answer when you've got at least half of those who voted anyway?
The answer's already been given.
Hold on. When you've got almost half as many... I'm sorry, but you know, Fiona Bruce is really already showing how biased she is, yeah?
That's the thing, the answer's being given because the question...
And she's not calling her out on it, which is very poor Brexit Party.
No, the question on the referendum was not no deal or a deal or all permutations. It was just...
Yes, that's right. It was just leave. And it was put through everybody's letterbox. That pamphlet that cost 9 million quid that David Cameron paid, had the British people pay for. Leave the customs union, leave the single market, leave the ECJ. That was it. That was it.
In or out of the EU?
Yeah, and actually, in and out of the EU, out means out of the institutions and out from under its jurisdiction. The hard and soft Brexit dichotomy is a false construction.
Alex, is Norway in the EU? Is Norway in the EU or out of the EU?
But Norway wasn't in and then left.
Is it in it or out of it?
Norway has its special
Norway
arrangement,
is
and
not
Norway is
in
part
the
of EFTA.
EU. It's not in the EU, but it is part of the single market.
Therefore, it is partly in the EU.
Is Turkey in the EU or out of it?
Well, it's not in the EU, we know that.
Yes, but it has a customs arrangement with the EU that is a customs union.
But
it has a special arrangement. It has a slightly different arrangement, actually, but all this is rather debatable.
The point is...
So the point is that you cannot simply, and this is the big swizz that's gone on, people like you have actually said what you...
People like you. Just get the language, yeah? Just get the language.
Voted for when you voted to leave the EU was no deal, when in actual fact at the time what people were told was they would be leaving the European Union, which means leaving the two treaties of the EU. It means not having a seat on the Council, not having a commissioner, and not sending people like yourself, members of the European Parliament, to the European Parliament.
How is shadow...
What is this people like yourself? What is that? Like, oh, you're somehow different. What? Is there something wrong with people that are fighting for Brexit? Because that's the insinuation in his language. He's now used that twice, that tone.
National Trade Secretary.
That is what leaving the EU actually means. You have tried to persuade, and I think...
Leaving the EU, I just summed it up already, yeah? It was put through the letterbox of every house in the country. We all paid for that, whether we supported it or not. We had to pay for that because the government decided that they would take one side, as opposed to allowing a balanced argument. And the Prime Minister of the time, David Cameron, said, it's leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, leaving the ECJ. We would have total sovereign control over our destiny. That is what was set out as leaving the EU. And that is precisely what a WTO deal constitutes.
Successfully tried to persuade many, many people that it means what you want it to, which is...
I'm sorry.
To
I
leave
think
both
that's
the
what
customs
everybody
union
else has been doing.
OK, well, tell you what,
frankly.
let's hear from the audience. There's lots of hands up. The man here in the front.
Can Brexit Party please put up somebody that can debate in future question times, if they actually get the chance to have somebody on question time? Please, please.
It's amazing that we pick on the Tory party all the time. I admit they're in disarray. But
They are the government.
Yeah, but wait, they might be the government. But then do you remember when we had the referendum vote of whether to stay in or come out? That wasn't it amazing? On those buses, the Liberals, the Conservatives and the Labour Party were all getting on separate buses. Now, they were divided. We had some of them all together and they were all good friends. So why is it now that, all right, the government's getting blamed? But I feel that the Liberals and the Labour Party and all the other parties are just as much to blame, because when they were given a free vote, you know, they said, forget what Theresa May's trying to put through. Let's have about 8 votes on various alternatives. And they couldn't even come up with one. You as politicians should be disgusted because you're not or we should be, because you're not doing your job, what we asked you to do 2.5 years ago.
All right.
You know what? He's absolutely spot on. And the bottom line is this. Constituents deserve to expect that their MPs serve their wishes, their will. It's set out in the handbook, in the House of Commons, the MP's handbook, that they should be serving their constituents. What the constituents tell them is what they should be doing, irrespective of their personal thoughts. So he's got a good point. And again, I refer to the fact that 408 of 650 constituencies voted to leave.
I think it's pretty certain that we're not going to get another deal, and even if we did try and get a deal, it'd be another 2 years and we'd be an embarrassment to the whole global community.
We have a deal, darling. It's called a WTO deal. You know, we've got that. It's there.
And I feel disappointed in Labour because I know it's divided, but they can either back no deal or a referendum in my eyes. That just not making a decision just doesn't do anything for you. And why can't you just make a decision? A lot of your party members want another referendum, so why won't the leadership do it?
Okay. Can I...
So she wants them to make a decision as long as it is basically Remain.
Briefly, because we've heard a lot from you, and there's two people who haven't got a word in edgeways so far.
I understand that frustration.
But
I think when you're confronted with a false dilemma, what you try and do is you try and steer a course that doesn't accept any of the falsehoods that you're being given. And what we've tried to do...
Hold on. The falsehoods that you've been given. The falsehoods that you've been given. I refer again to the pamphlet. The pamphlet was very clear. It was also Project Fear, and it said that there would be Armageddon if you voted to leave. And, you know, people voted to leave. They decided that they did not agree with David Cameron. They wanted to leave. He said what leave meant. He also said in untold number of speeches that it would be our choice. Our choice, not politicians, I quote. Your choice, your decision. There will be no further renegotiation. There will be no second referendum. Binding. That's what he said.
Is we've tried to bring the two parts of our country together. That was an honourable thing to do. Unfortunately, we failed. Now, you say, well, in that case, let's go to a second referendum. We don't have, in the opposition, the votes in Parliament to insist on that. We can't introduce legislation.
Your support would be
But it's part now of our policy that we would say absolutely, if we can get a second referendum, and I voted for it in those votes, those indicative votes, as did most of my party, we voted for that in the indicative votes. And what we're saying now is we have to now be in that position where we say we have to go back to the people on this. I would prefer a general election to do it, because I think that's the only way in which we actually have the tools in Parliament to get those votes and do it.
Okay. It's interesting.
You know, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because he seems to think the Labour Party, from their rhetoric over the course of, well, you know, forever and a day, but it hasn't changed, which is the interesting thing, since the EU election, since the Labour Party was, like the Tories, pretty much wiped out, in terms of MEPs, in terms of the vote share. Their rhetoric hasn't changed. They're still saying we need to go back to the country. I think, and there was a poll today that bears this out, which there's news just in the last couple of hours, I think. I just saw the headline, but it's pretty clear, you know, it's pretty obvious what's going on. The public, there's a very, very strong chance that the Brexit Party would wipe, not clean up, but would hold more seats than any other party, Tories or Labour. And so I think the Labour are taking a huge gamble. If they really want a general election, I think they're taking a huge gamble now. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we ended up seeing a Brexit party, if there was a general election in the foreseeable future, i.e., you know, within the next couple of months or something like that, that we would see a coalition which would be Brexit party led, with the Tories trailing and the DUP absolutely unifying. So I think that they are treading a very dangerous line by still calling for a general election, Labour.
I think so many questions being directed towards Barry. Of course, as Barry points out, he's not in government. Rory, let's just go back to the original question for a moment.
Now, hold on a sec. Before we get onto this Rory bloke, I've got to stop this for a sec. I've got to pause because I need a pee, yeah. Oh, blimey. Yeah, back in a sec. Okay, that was Rory, Stewart coming up. Here we go.
Is electing a new Conservative leader like changing the captain of the Titanic after it struck an iceberg? So what's the point of this leadership campaign? And all you're walking around the country and talking to people and filming on your mobile phone?
Well, I think the analogy that strikes me is that this is a very difficult situation, but it's not an iceberg. And actually, it's much more like Shackleton trying to get that boat across the ocean to the other side, and you can do it. And why can you do it? Because you've only got to do three things as a Conservative leader. You've got to be able to get Brexit done, you've got to be able to, with all respect, Barry, defeat Jeremy Corbyn, and you've got to be able to reunify the country. And the big debate within this Tory leadership contest is, how do you do that? Some people are suggesting the way to do it is through a no-deal Brexit. And
it's not a no-deal Brexit.
Say some people, 75% of Tory party members support it. I mean, are you in the wrong party?
I'm absolutely in the right party because, in my experience, and there'll be maybe even Tory party members in this audience, the fact that you're a member of a political party doesn't mean that you don't have an enormous amount of experience and wisdom. And my experience talking to associations up and down the country is that if you take it out of the black and white, Brexit, anti-Brexit, down to the details and out to the future, what kind of trade deal do you want for this country? Do we have the opportunity to sell tens of millions of electric cars into Europe? What do we want for farmers in Cumbria? Put it into the future, work back from that, and you find your way towards a deal. And the problem with no deal is that
it's not no deal.
It sounds like an instant response, but it's not. It's a recipe for delay.
It's an opportunity to trade with the entire world on our terms, including the EU.
In the end, this is a parliamentary democracy. We have to get it through Parliament.
There was a referendum act which gave us the opportunity to decide, and we did. And your job is not to play party politics. It is to It is to uphold democracy.
We have to get it through the EU. Michel Barnier said that this treaty, the treaty that Theresa May has negotiated, is the only option.
So this is why we need to be straight with people. Absolutely straight. The issue is not...
Hold on a sec. Fiona Bruce made a good point there. They are saying that. Barnier said that today. Who gives a stuff what they say? This is just rhetoric, yeah? Rhetoric coming from the EU. Do they want to trade with us or not?
Anymore pretending that you're going to get some different deal out of the EU by October. Nor is there any point pretending that we're going to be able to leave with a no deal in October. Both these pretenses...
Yes, there is. Because there is an... well, actually, no, I don't think there is an act of Parliament, is there? I think that the extent... Oh, no, sorry. Oh, for crying out loud. No, I'm getting hazy. The fact is that if we leave, or if we show them that we are willing to leave on Halloween, then do they want to trade or not? It's as simple as that. And do the maths. What do you reckon?
Lead to more delay. The resolution for this problem lies in Parliament. We're going to...
A Parliament which has been bought, which is not representative of the British people. And that is our problem.
We're going to have to take it out of Parliament. We're going to create a citizens' assembly, just as they did in Ireland over abortion, which was a very polarised...
And who's going to be appointed on the citizens' assembly? I'm sorry. We had a referendum, the biggest electoral turnout in British history.
This, you black and white.
And they then had a referendum. Are you proposing another referendum of your Citizens' Assembly?
Absolutely not, because my experience, when you put people together in a room, now I may be wrong, maybe that you put citizens in a room and they listen for 3 weeks to details and arguments, and they come out as they did before. Half of them for no deal, half of them for a second referendum. But
no, 1.3 million people more voted to leave. 1.3 million people. In GE terms, 408 of 650 constituencies voted to leave. 62.8%. A landslide.
But I don't believe that's what will happen. I believe if you talk about the future, the trade deals that all of you want, the future for your house, the future for your business, you're going to come back to a pragmatic, moderate deal which is going to allow us to unify the country.
And if the Citizens' Assembly...
I'm sorry, the guy is just absolutely talking complete baloney. Baloney. If the Tories vote this guy in, well, I mean, they deserve to die anyway. They deserve to be completely ousted in any case. We have seen that, surely, with the fact that they allowed Theresa May, a Remainer, to lead the Brexit negotiations. This guy is just a mini Theresa May.
Comes back with no deal as a recommendation. Would you accept that?
I do not believe that's going to happen. But in the end, but let me explain why. Because in the end,
hold on, let's hear that back.
The trade deals that all of you want, the future for your house, the future for your business, you're going to come back to a pragmatic, moderate deal which is going to allow us to unify the country.
And if the Citizens' Assembly comes back with no deal as a recommendation, would you accept that?
It's not no deal.
I do not believe that's going to happen. But in the end...
Okay, so he's not answering that key question. That key question, that even if it went along his lines of overturning the democratic will of the British people and having a citizens' assembly with goodness knows who appointed, a bunch of Gina Millers probably. It's incredible. I'm sorry. It's just incredible. It just does not. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. This is not a conservative mentality at all. It's a liberal Democrat mentality. Well, no, at least they're honest. It's a Keir Starmer mentality. It's a Barry Gardiner mentality. It's rhetoric for the purpose of remaining, ultimately remaining, irrespective of the will of the British people. That's what this guy is.
But let me explain why. Because in the end, Parliament is sovereign. Parliament's got to make the decision. Nobody can get round Parliament to return to...
And yeah, well, apparently they can. They can get around themselves. Because Parliament gave us the choice. Because they didn't have any choice, did they? They had their feet held to the fire. They gave us the choice. The one time we had the choice. And now they want to overturn that. If you're not disgusted with the way that, whatever side of the argument you're on, if you're not disgusted with the way that our Parliament treats its ambivalence to the British people, well, we've got a serious problem, yeah? You really need to think again.
To my Shackleton analogy, that's the sea you've got to cross. That's the sea you've got to cross. Nobody can guarantee you can cross that sea, but that's the sea you've got to cross.
It'll be choppy.
And the question that needs to face all of you in choosing anybody to be Prime Minister, if you're doing that, is who is best able to take this through Parliament, not who's best able to produce fantasies of a renegotiation or fantasies of a no-deal delay.
Stephen,
I'll tell you who is not best placed to lead us. Is somebody who is willing to hand away our best card, which is a WTO deal, and is just throw that away and say, EU, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What sensible, he talked about pragmatism. What pragmatic business would do that? What pragmatic business would give their competitor all the cards like that? I'm sorry, but this guy is a moron.
Give us a psychologist's and an outsider's perspective on the whys and wherefores, or any sense, in fact, in electing a new Conservative leader.
Yeah, well, I'm reminded of H.L. Mencken's quote about democracy. The democracy is based on the principle that the people know what they want and they deserve to get it good and hard. Here, it's...
I'm sure there have been plenty of other quotes as well. And yes, as Churchill said, democracy is a lousy system. Come up with a better one. Come up with a better system. And that would be wonderful. Let's have utopia. It's a lousy system, but the rest are far worse.
It seems to me that as much as we value direct participatory democracy, if the people vote for square circles, it's going to be a problem for the politicians to deliver it. And there seems to be a number of square circles here, taking the view from an outsider who has no direct skin in the game. But a no-deal Brexit seems mad. It just seems like a recipe for chaos.
I'm sorry, but I think a quarter of the world trade on WTOs. In fact, I think it's pretty much all the world trades on WTOs now, including the EU, because they don't have trade agreements with everybody. And when they don't, WTOs come into place. It's a soft landing on which we can build and have trade deals. And we have them queuing up, wanting to create trade deals with us. So already this guy has proven that he does have some kind of skin in this game, apparently, because of how ridiculous that comment was.
No deal that has been proposed is acceptable within the overall concept of Brexit. The idea of having a border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland is a bad idea, but then...
And we don't need it. We don't need a border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. And the EU themselves have said that in the event of there being no EU-UK deal, that there would not be any hard border, negating the entire backstop argument.
Of not having a border would again be inconsistent with what Brexit promised to deliver. So it does seem that as we start to...
No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. And by the way, that whole border issue is actually a trade issue. It's a trade issue. The EU refused to talk trade, to have parallel talks. The first thing that Theresa May did when she took over the mantle for delivering Brexit, Brexit means Brexit, was to say, oh, no, you're fine. Okay, that's all right. If you don't want to talk trade yet, that's fine. We'll talk about that afterwards. Afterwards! Once we've given you our 39 billion hard-earned pounds and all the rest of it. Just beggars belief. It just absolutely beggars belief.
Think about the actual implications of implementing Brexit, it seems more and more like a square circle. And that...
No, it doesn't. Talk trade or bugger off. It's that simple.
The essence of intelligence, of learning, of progress is absorbing new information, learning from your mistakes, not repeating the same policy if new information that comes to light shows that it's unreasonable. Based on what we know now about how to implement Brexit, it seems to me perfectly reasonable to have a second decision, a second referendum.
Okay, so he's really proven his colours. Another moron. Look, the fact is, this process, is so complicated. It's so complicated. It isn't complicated. We have had an establishment chock-a-block full of Remainers that have engineered all of these problems. All that Theresa May needed to do was to say to the EU, when they said, oh no, we're not talking trade yet, we're not having parallel talks, we're going to deal with the withdrawal, the divorce first, and get our money, and then we'll talk about trade afterwards. Oh, and by the way, this backstop as well, yeah, which holds you in, and we have a veto on when you leave. And she said yes. That was the complication. The fact that we had a moron negotiating, as opposed to somebody who would stand up for Britain and say, no, you talk trade, or we go off on WTOs. It was that simple. They need our trade more than we need theirs. Do the maths. It was very simple. She threw it away. That's where the complication stems from. It's so easy to reverse that for a proper British Prime Minister to say, guess what? You talk trade as an adult institution or you bugger off. And then we'll see what happens and how they change their tone. My God, they would change their tone so fast. Anybody with any degree of logic can see that.
Absolutely put his finger on it. The difficulty here, part of it does lie in Parliament. It lies amongst Brexiteers who have not come to a coherent view of what Brexit is because...
Yes, we have, and it was in that pamphlet.
Theresa May's deal, because that's the only deal on the table. And I think the suggestion that we can have any confidence that there is a majority...
And Theresa May was a Remainer, a foreign agent. Let's be clear about that, her deal.
That's why the only answer is to put it back to the people and say, this is what the details of Brexit looks like. Can you confirm you want to go ahead with this? Or having seen...
We don't like your decision, so we want you to have another go, and we'll just do a better job at rigging it this time.
Brexit, I mean, I'll let you come in. I just want to take a question from Sally Blackett. Sally, where are you?
Should a new Prime Minister invite Nigel Farage to join his or her Brexit negotiating team?
Well, Rory, let me come to you then. In terms of a negotiation...
So that question is being asked to a panel consisting of 4 Remainers, 1 Brexiteer who can barely speak English from the Brexit Party, and with the panel overseen by a BBC Remoron. Let's see what the answer is. I can't predict it, can you?
Doing the negotiation. The problem with this whole thing is this pretense that 650 MPs, each with different views, can negotiate a trade deal with Brussels. It simply doesn't work. And in response to Stephen Pinker's point, I have enormous respect for him as a neuroscientist, but there is a sense in which the definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result. The second...
Actually, it's over and over again, but never mind.
...is split almost straight down the middle by the issue of Brexit. Doesn't matter how people vote, we'll find out the same thing. The only way to unify the country is to take second referendum off the table, take no deal off the table, and find a compromise which will work for us, provide opportunities, and get our economy growing again. So
hold on a sec. So in other words, there's no Brexit. Because if you take WTOs off the table, if you take leaving the custom union, the single market and the CCJ off the table, there is no Brexit.
That I've picked up walking around recently, so I was in Woking today, I was in Warrington and Wigan yesterday, is that a lot of this is about fixing 1,000 small injustices in daily life. It's about listening to people and realizing, for example, in Barking, that the issue there is that people simply don't feel safe in the streets. Somewhere else it may be...
All of this stuff is important, yeah. All of these issues are very important, but the fact is that until we can take back control, we cannot determine on our terms how these things are sorted out. They'll be sorted out by Brussels. That's the way it works. Look at the Lisbon Treaty. That is the way it will happen. We have to sort out Brexit. That's the issue. Until we sort out Brexit, everything else is secondary at best.
1st of October. So how do we have time either for a second referendum or, more to the point, a general election?
Okay. The man there in the blue shirt. Yes.
I would say this to Labour, especially after the Euro election results, you're bang on the drum and saying, oh, we want another election. I would say be careful what you wish for, because if you think that you had 14% in the Euro elections, if you think that's going to jump to 35% come a general election,
well said.
You're deluded.
Well said. That's the first thing I've heard in this entire programme so far that I can say wholeheartedly, that guy is, he knows his stuff.
And a direct democracy functioning together. We've had, we elect representatives for us inside our parliament, but yet we expect them to understand our commands from a direct democracy standpoint. It just doesn't work together at all.
I think one of the main issues is that when people voted Brexit, a lot of people didn't actually understand what they were voting for. And no, they did.
Look, if you trust politicians by default, that's very silly. You know what? It really is. I mean, we should have learned by now. You have to do your own research. It's absolutely true that people were deceived on both sides of the argument, Leave and Remain. Nobody was told the truth about how we were led into the EEC. Nobody was told the truth about that. Nobody was told the truth about all the treaties subsequently and how they were passed. Nobody's been told the truth about practically anything. It's the entire debate has been superficial. So actually, that lady, she does have a good point, but she doesn't know the reason why.
Okay. Alex, clearly the answer would be yes.
Well, you know, the man's not radioactive. I've spent the best part of a decade with him and I'm fine. And actually, he is the sole voice, really, that represents the 17.4 million who voted to leave. He has now become the person who is proud to stand and say, we've got to deliver this result. Isn't complicating it.
How do you stand that claim up, Alex? Alex, now how... That's quite a claim.
Well, when you look at the success of my party in the recent elections, and when you look at the collapse of the Labour and the Conservative vote, and people going either to Joe's party, the Lib Dems, or to us, people now identify primarily
more
with
people
being
voted on a petition to
Remainers.
revoke Article 50 than voted for the Brexit Party last week.
But... and yet we still beat you in the elections, so, you know, what can I say? The point is this, actually, if I could finish. You know, Nigel's actually got 2 decades' worth of experience inside that parliament. I think Rory is actually being fairly sensible in saying, you know, why keep demonising somebody who, in many respects, is completely in tune with a big chunk of the electorate? You know,
let's just be clear. Joe Swinson said more people voted to revoke Article 50. No, more MPs voted. Big difference. Big difference. And yes, Alex Phillips is perfectly correct in saying that the people did speak at the EU elections. I think more importantly, they spoke at the referendum, yeah?
The morning after the referendum, he came on the television and he said, we won it without a single bullet being fired. A week earlier, an MP had been murdered. I have to say, that man is beyond pale. He should not be in our politics. We should not be inviting him into the negotiating team.
I don't think that Jo Cox was... I don't think that it is in any way fair to conflate her murder with anything to do with the democratic choice for Brexit. I think that that is absolutely disgusting. I don't know what the political... I don't actually know what the political views were of that guy, that nutter that killed Jo Cox. But to suggest that one person somehow tarnishes all of those people that are fighting for their sovereignty, I find absolutely disgusting.
And that's something that we need to respect and be proud of, and we need to unlock the problems in Parliament. And that's done by reaching across to them, but getting our own party, our Conservative Party, together again.
It could well be by having another general election, actually, because I think now we do see that this sham that is SW1, not just the House of Commons, but the House of Lords and the civil service, which has been politicised since the days of Blair, needs routing, root and branch, and possibly the only way to achieve the beginnings of doing that is through having a referendum and just seeing who would get in, kicking out these Anna Soubries, these Dominic Greaves. Yeah.
It is governments who negotiate international treaties. And international treaties are perhaps the longest lasting contracts that we enter into. Governments have to do that. Nigel Farage will...
Yeah, and we've got a great one. It's called the World Trade Organization regulations, yeah? WTOs.
If there is a deal that is eventually a new deal coming through to the European Parliament, he will have a say in that. And he'll have a say as a representative in the European Parliament.
But you say governments should negotiate. They haven't made such a good fist of it so far.
Sorry, I didn't say...
Actually, technically, he'll have bugger all say, so far as that's concerned, in the EU Parliament, so far as home turf is concerned.
As on the Council, the 28 governments come together, the 27 who are negotiating against us. So it's governments that must do that. They bear the responsibility. If Nigel Farage had wanted to be part of those negotiations, then he should have stood for election to the UK Parliament.
He did, in South Thanet. And as I recall, there was all sorts of shenanigans going on there, electorally, with very little due process off the back of it. Carry on.
And failed to do so. The only other thing I would say is that, you know, when we talk about a second referendum, Jo talks about a second referendum because she's always wanted to remain. She always,
so
from the very beginning...
Like some very senior members of your own
party. Very consistent, as have the Liberal Democrats.
From the beginning, Jo has believed that the democratic result of the referendum didn't matter.
So do you.
No, that's not true.
Sorry.
That's not true, Ben.
And that is why she has always wanted the second referendum.
Joe's trying to get a word in here, Barry. He's disagreeing with you vehemently.
We said, and it was our leader Tim Farron at the time who came out after the referendum, and he said that when the Brexit deal is negotiated, that should be put to the people because there will be details of that are complex details of a new relationship with the European Union, and that should be up to the people to decide. Yes.
Okay, so she just admitted it. She said after the referendum, Nick Farron changed the goalposts and said, now we need a second referendum. She just admitted it.
vote to invoke Article 50,
No,
which means
because
from
we
day
did-
one,
we should-
you refuse the democratic result of that referendum.
We should not at all have started the Article 50 process when the government had no idea of its negotiating position. That is what led us to this situation of having these deadlines.
Okay.
Well, we could have known that. The government could have set out its negotiating position before invoking Article 50. Instead, it took the Cabinet more than a year after that. So that was...
Only because they were a bunch of remorons that never wanted to leave, just like Joe Swinson and just like Barry Gardiner.
Let's move off Brexit, shall we? What do you think? We've talked about it for some time, some considerable time. There's another story that's been big in the news today. I want to address that as well. Janet Rimmer.
Will a cut in tuition fees do anything to address the...
Okay, all right. I might just finish this now because they're not talking about Brexit, and that's what's important. Everything else, on this trajectory, if we stay in the EU, will be decided by Brussels. And so, frankly, there is no point in us even debating it. Unless we get Brexit, everything else is immaterial. And that should be the answer to this question and every subsequent question on Question Time. But I think we can safely say it will not be. So, yeah, there you go. Just a few thoughts from me on this. For what it's worth, it is an opinion. Everything's an opinion. You've got to make up your own minds, people. There you go. BBC QT analysis. A bit of an experiment for Daily Brexit, but something I might do more regularly. Maybe I shouldn't interrupt quite as much as I did. Maybe I should wait until the full answer is given until I interrupt. But I'm kind of assuming that people probably that are interested in this would have watched Question Time as well, if you can stomach it. And that you got a good gist of what these folks are saying. I hope that's useful. There you go. All right. We will, I don't know. I might do this again. I might do this more regularly. For the sake of Facebook and YouTube, who I have no doubt would love to pull this critique, I would point out that this broadcast, the use of BBC material is used on a fair dealing basis, because the BBC is the story just as much as these political parties. They prove it on EU election night, when on their panel of pundits they did not have a single representative of any Brexit party. None. They had no... the Brexit party itself, they certainly had none. I don't think they had any UKIP either. And in the case of Brexit party, they were widely expected to clear up. They were polling way in the lead, and guess what? They won. They did not... The BBC did not have a single Brexit party representative on their panel of pundits on EU election night. The BBC is a propagandist outfit, and it needs calling out for allowing these lies to perpetrate in our democracy. Good evening.